Hi, welcome to this session from TalkAbout from October 2015. I'm going to introduce our first speaker today, who is Elisa Pineda. She's going to talk about obesity in Mexico. Welcome.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'll be presenting my research, which I'm working for my PhD here at UCL at the Department of Epidemiology and Public Health, and it's titled "Is the corner store a contributing factor for obesity in Mexico?" And this is a spatial analysis of the food environment and its association to obesity in Mexico. So I'll be presenting a brief introduction, followed by a literature review, my aim, research, questions, and objectives, followed by methods, results, and what's the benefit of this study for Mexico. So I'll begin with the introduction. Today, obesity is one of the main critical public health issues around the world. More than 2.8 million people die each year because they are either overweight or obese. Once it was associated mostly to high-income countries, today it's a great concern for low and middle-income countries, where obesity is also a coexisting problem with undernutrition. Obesity is also one of the top global burdens generated by human beings, so it's preventable, but still, governments spend more than $2 trillion a year because of it. One of the causes of obesity may be dietary intake, genetic factors, also the physical environment, and this image explains very well the different aspects that influence individuals over their health and obesity. So we might have at the individual level age, gender, genetics, knowledge, skills that affect how we eat and the choices we make that make us or does not make us so healthy. On the second level, we have the family relationships. There's a theory in regard to obesity that says that obesity is contagious regarding to the relationships we have with peers, and that might make us more pressure towards choosing certain types of food. Also, we have the social and community networks, which might also play an important role over the foods we choose. And finally, we have the local environment and the wider society. So the local environment is where I'll be focusing my study, and this refers to the environment where we live, or where we work, or where we take our daily living. While the wider society refers to the public policies, the government that we have, also the national wealth, or also the media. So Mexico is one of the middle-income countries that is struggling greatly with obesity. So it has a population of more than 112 million inhabitants, and it's considered to be the second largest economy in Latin America, and also the ninth largest oil producer in the world. It's also one of the main industries and major exporter of fruits and vegetables. So produce, it's a very important factor for the population in Mexico. And compared to other European countries, Mexico is about 8 times larger than the UK. So Mexico does not only have the highest overweight and obesity rates in the world, but it's also the life expectancy of Mexico compared to other OECD countries is quite low. 7 out of 10 Mexicans are either overweight or obese. In 2000, 24.2% of the population were either overweight or obese. By 2012, this number had increased all the way to 32.4% of the population. One of the factors that has contributed to this problem is NAFTA, or the North American Free Trade Agreement, which took place in 1994. And many of the benefits that were highlighted from this agreement were that tariffs were eliminated on trading goods. Also, it increased the trade in North American countries, which included Canada, the US, and Mexico. And also, it lowered the price of many goods and, of course, foods. It also increased the industrial integration of the countries, and it benefited the industry in Mexico. However, this was not appreciated by the population. One of the main goods that was imported to Mexico was corn, and much of it was transgenic, affecting not only the health of the inhabitants, but also the economy, and the jobs were also mainly affected for the farmers. It is said that NAFTA is one of the main reasons or a factor that contributes to migration to the US. So it was not only pros that were obtained from this trade, but also unequal gains, job displacement. It didn't improve the quality of the Mexicans, and maybe there's a similar story coming for Europe. Have you heard of TTIP? It's a transatlantic trade and investment partnership where they're trying to have free trade from Europe to the US and vice versa. So Mexico has gone through a diet transition, where before we had a great variety of healthy foods, but today the government, it's one of the main leaders for the Coke industry. So in 2012, an average Mexican consumed 163.3 liters of Coke a year, even more than what an average American consumed in a year. So what has Mexico been doing in regard to this problem? Well, some things. For instance, in 2008, the first Sugar-Sweetened Beverage Tax, or SSB tax, was thought of or introduced by NGOs. By 2012, the Health Ministry proposed a 20% tax because it was thought that this amount would be more effective to decrease the consumption of this type of drinks. However, in 2014, in January, a 10% tax was actually introduced instead of the 20%, and it also was complemented with an 8% tax over junk food. These included foods that had 275 kilocalories per gram and excluded all basic food products. Also, in 2014, a new labeling regulation was introduced. However, this regulation was very lax and much more relaxed. So compared to the European pledge, it allowed for more freedom for the industry. This past July, this same year, another tax was introduced to ready foods or ready meals of 16%. And also, it was known that the SSBs were dropped, the sales of this type of drinks were dropped up to 6%, suggesting that the tax might be affecting positively. Other approaches that were done in Mexico by NGOs were a very strong campaign in order to inform consumers and try to inform also the government and the public health sector to influence them into changing these policies for the benefit of the population. So they're having many measures that have been taken into account to tackle obesity. However, none of them have actually focused on the food environment or making the availability of healthy foods an ample thing for the population. So I researched the literature, searching several databases, including PubMed and Scopus, and I obtained 55 studies from which the majority indicated that the presence or the proximity of fast food outlets were related to a higher BMI or obesity. Also occurred with the majority of studies where they indicated that convenience stores, because of their availability of sugar, sweetened beverages, and junk food, were also highly correlated with a higher BMI, which is an indicator of obesity. Meanwhile, supermarkets and farms were highly associated to lower BMIs or less indexes of obesity. So among the conclusions and gaps of these studies, the majority of the studies were focused on higher income countries. Only one of them was focused in Brazil. Also, there was a focus only on specific populations or areas, which made it difficult to translate the results to other types of population or countries. Also, many of the studies assumed that certain types of food outlets were healthy. For instance, they assumed that supermarkets or farms were always healthy, when in reality it's not that way, because they might also sell other types of products that are not that healthy for the population. Also, the geographical level of analysis and the data availability was different, which might make the analysis or the comparison among studies also quite difficult. And also there was lack of ground truthing in studies. Ground truthing refers to confirming or verifying that the food outlets actually exist and they're still geolocated at the place where they said they would be. And also lack of longitudinal studies. Longitudinal studies refers when you are following a population for a certain period of time to see if they develop any changes or increase a certain type of disease. So most of the studies that were observed were only cross-sectional, which means that they were only for a very short period of time. So due to these gaps and to the information that I found, I decided to focus my aim on the assessment of the influence of the food environment over obesity in Mexican adults. And I would be focusing my research by using the National Health Survey on Nutrition from 2012 called Ensalud, which was a source for the health data. And as well, I obtained the food outlet information, including its geolocation, from INEGI, from a section called National Statistic Directory of Economic Units. That was from 2014, which is the most recent. And then the geographic areas, for instance, the census tract areas or the state areas, etc., that was obtained from INEGI as well. And the count and census of households and population was also obtained from INEGI. The latest data available is from 2010. So for the health data, this was collected in years 2011 and 2012. The next available survey will be in 2016. This included 50,528 households, which is a representative sample of the Mexican population, at least in 2012. It included 96 individuals, and there was a very high response rate of 87%. And it included measures like anthropometry, which are body measures to estimate obesity, also physical activity, dietary intake, and socioeconomical status. So the variables that were interesting to me for this analysis were BMI, which is an indicator of obesity, also waist circumference, dietary intake, calorie intake, SSV intake was also very important for this, macronutrient intake, physical activity, socioeconomical status, and geographic area. So the individuals were actually not geolocated, and I couldn't obtain their exact address because of confidential reasons, but still I was able to concatenate or find several data that I could link together in order to geolocate their individuals over the map. Then the geographic data included all the food outlets that are available in Mexico, except the mobile units, which are food establishments that move around. It could be within the same day or within a week. And also recreational facilities and physical activity facilities were included in the study, and as well as the census tract area and X and Y coordinates. So I have the exact location of this type of establishments. So Mexico is conformed by 31 states and 1 federal district, and each state can be classified as aje, for instance this one, and each state is conformed by municipalities, or ajem, and each ajem is conformed by an ajev, which is a census tract area. The census tract area can be either rural or urban, and the rural census tract areas can be conformed by blocks. So my health data, I was able to geolocate the individuals all the way to ajev, or census tract area. An ajev is about 11,000 hectares, and it can include from 1 to 50 blocks, and it includes housings, commercial, and industrial areas. While the food outlets were, I was able to geolocate them exactly to the place within each block. So my outcomes, or my variables of interest that I would be analyzing, would be BMI, dietary intake, SSV intake, and caloric intake. These are all estimators of obesity. Also, the exposure, or the variables I would be analyzing for as an influence for obesity, would be the count of convenience stores, fast food outlets, restaurants, supermarkets, and fruit and vegetable stores. So the count, it's actually a geographical method that I employed using geographical information systems, which is a space analysis system. And what it does is just count the features, in this case the food outlets, in a specific area. Then density, it takes into account the exact area, and you can obtain actually what are called hotspots. which tells you how concentrated an area is of a determined feature or food outlet. And proximity, what it does is measure the distance from one point to another. It could either be Euclidean distance, which is a straight line, or network distance, which takes into account the actual roads and the direction of the roads. Also, I found the geolocation of the individuals, and around each individual I drew a radius of 200 meters, 500, 1 kilometer, and 2 kilometers. That way I would be counting, determining the density and the proximity of each of these food outlets within this radius or buffers. So this is what I have done till now, taking into account BMI, count all the food outlets and all the buffers or radius around individuals. So how I did this, it was using geographical information systems, which is a very important tool for visualizing, questioning, analyzing, and interpreting data to understand relationships, patterns, and trends. And one of the methods that I will be exploring associations between obesity and the food environment would be using geographical weighted regression, or GWR, which is a statistical method that takes into account space or clustering of, in this case, food outlets. It also is much more specific for this type of study because it's much more accurate than other type of regressions or analyses. So we'll now go to the results that I have gathered so far. This map right here of Mexico shows the mean BMI of the population per state in Mexico. So as we can observe, the northern states show a higher BMI for the population. Also in the south, we might see higher BMIs as well, which is very ironical because in the north we have a greater influence from the US, which might be affecting the diet, but in the south we also have the higher indices of undernutrition that coexist with obesity. This other map shows the different census tract areas in Mexico. They were not available as a whole, so I had to download each one of them separately and merge them together. So the urban areas were 2,476, and I merged them together so that I could geolocate the individuals over each census tract area. And here the individuals are classified according to their BMI, the indicator of obesity, and I chose the city of Hermosillo because that's where I'm from. So 95% of the individuals were able to be placed or geolocated around the map in Mexico. And once I geolocated the individuals, I traced different buffers or radius around those individuals. The first one is of 200 meters, then 500, 1 kilometer, and also I drew a 2 kilometer buffer, which I did not include because it would be too large. And also I determined the census tract areas, which are the orange polygons in the background. Those are the urban census tract areas, and over them I geolocated different food outlets. The green ones are fruit and vegetable stores, the blue ones are supermarkets, fast food outlets are in red, convenience stores in black, and Ensanut represented by the yellow pins are the individuals from the Health and Nutritional Survey. So for the first one, for supermarkets, which are spread out, what I did was create different buffers and did a count of the different supermarkets within each buffer, and then determine the 25th percentile, the median, and the 75th percentile. Of course, most of the supermarkets were located as when you went further out of the individual or farther away from the individual. In the case of restaurants, the count of these, or the concentration of these around individuals, was much higher, and you can even observe them within the census tract and 200 meters of individuals, so they are quite accessible and available. Over here we have another map. This is what I referred to previously called a hotspot map, which shows that the red, almost yellow zones are the most concentrated areas, in this case for convenience stores. And here we have one of the most common convenience stores in Mexico. which has been growing dramatically, and they're placing them around vulnerable areas, for instance around schools, and there's currently no regulation in regard to that in Mexico. In this case, most of the convenience stores were located around 500 meters, 1 kilometer, and 2 kilometers away from the individual. I have to highlight that this is within the neighborhood environment. It would be interesting also to explore the work environment or the school environment, which might be a future work also. And then we have here the census tract areas, which are the polygons in the back, and then the circles represent the count of convenience stores. The bigger the circle, the more convenience stores there are. And the blue dots are the individuals. And of course, convenience stores also would represent or could be translated as a higher availability for SSDs. And finally, we have this map where I've tried to summarize everything. We have the individuals in the center, the different buffers, and the convenience stores around them. So what I did was, with geographical information systems, I did a count of the different food outlets within each buffer, and that way I explored associations of obesity and the proximity density count of convenience stores and other food outlets. The result of the analysis, I did it for the convenience stores till now, and it turned out that for every convenience store close to an individual, the risk of increasing the VMI adds up to 20.20, which means that this is a high correlation for obesity and the presence of convenience stores. So the conclusions so far indicate that there are no studies of the food environment in Mexico, and most of the food outlets are either assumed to be healthy or unhealthy, which may not be true in most of the cases. Also, it's very important to consider the geographic scale to explore the environment around the individuals. And finally, one of my reflections about this is that it's very important to take careful measures in regard to the regulation of the stores, because, for instance, convenience stores, there are two main types of convenience stores in Mexico, according to INEGI, abarrotes and mini supers. So abarrotes are usually small enterprises owned by the people, while mini supers are chain stores that are growing dramatically with no regulation at all. The smaller stores represent a very important economic source for the population. If they were to be eliminated, they might affect negatively the economy of the population. So I think it's very important to, instead of drastically eliminating them or setting barriers to the people, I think what should be done is increase the availability of healthy food. So my last point would be, what's the benefit of this study for Mexico? Well, first of all, generating public policy that would help to tackle obesity. Also, healthy food promotion. Instead, like I mentioned, of targeting the people, it would be better to provide them with better and healthier options, so that instead of telling them what to do, they should have higher policies that would affect the majority of the people. And also, less obesity would signify better quality of life. And geographical information systems represents a tool that can allow for better decision making. So if the industry is using this type of tool to geolocate convenience stores or other type of industries so that people can actually buy more from them, why not use this tool within the public health sector to benefit the people and the health of them? So finally, I'm just going to show you a little bit of how the geographical information systems work. I'm going to see if I can open a couple of links. So I translated the work into ArcGIS Online, which is a tool where you can share the maps that you've done. And I'll open this one too. Oh. I should have signed in, sorry. Do I still have time?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. Okay. It's going to be too difficult. I thought it would be automatic. So I'll leave it till there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.